Good evening and welcome to Law Talk, the show that brings the Constitution, the law, and the events of today to you each month. Good evening, Mark. What kind of subjects are we covering tonight?
Well, the first subject we're going to talk about is we've got U.S. District Judge Andrew Hanen, and he came up against the Obama administration on an executive order.
Are we talking about in Texas? And we're also talking about what is known as the delayed, let's see, the exact wording on this is
DAPA or
DACA. DAPA and DACA.
DAPA and DACA.
Yeah, those are the two identifiers for these laws, which effectively says the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrival Act, DACA, and the other one is the Deferred Action for Parents Americans Act, which effectively says people do not get deported. And so Judge Hanen actually made a unique ruling, and why don't you tell me about that ruling?
Well, let's back up a little bit. Okay, what you have is what they call undocumented aliens, or people who come across the border without inspection. So if you come through the border and you get your passport stamped or you get your green card stamped, that's called passing with inspection, right? If you come across the border not going through inspection, that means you snuck across the border, okay? And so what we've got is, you know, apparently 5 million, maybe 10, maybe 50 million people coming over here, and they're here, and they snuck across the border. They weren't inspected. They don't have any papers. And what Obama wants to do is, it's kind of like the good old Chicago days. He's going to say, look, you get an income tax credit, earned in, the tax.
Under the IRS, it's the earned income tax credit, so you actually get a rebate.
Yeah, 10 or 20,000.
Even though you've never paid taxes.
So for, you get 10, 20,000 a year for 3 years. So that's 60K or whatever it is, 30, 60K.
Isn't that pretty good? Do we get that?
No, you don't.
Oh,
and then you get welfare benefits, health, Title VIII. So you get pretty good to come over, and you get like a cash settlement. And the idea is that they want to have people who are can't really support themselves, and they're relying on the central government, and they'd be reliable voters.
Well, you're talking about the old Chicago style,
exactly, right.
And when we're here tonight, we have to think about buying votes. The
yeah.
old Chicago, the Daily Machine, and
yeah.
buying votes.
And yeah, so you want to vote early and vote often. And what's the beautiful thing about buying votes? You don't buy them with your own money.
Oh, of course not.
You buy them with other people's money, by the taxpayers' money.
OPM.
And so what happens here? Let's say for one of these voters that you're going to buy, it's about maybe $1 million a lifetime in benefits. And so you would say $1 million a vote, that's not much, but that's not what's happening. The genius, I think, it's $1 million per voter.
And it's not just the one vote they're buying. They're buying every vote for the rest of that person's life, every vote for their kid's life. And that could go on generational, because we were allowed to come here under the great and powerful Democratic Party. Is that what we're talking about here?
But you've got to look at it mathematically. Okay?
Oh, mathematically.
If you look at Acorn.
Is there a formula?
Yeah, there is a formula. Like when you look at, how Obama made his way up through Acorn and that kind of thing. Now, those people aren't voting once per election. They're being bussed around. They're buying 4, 5, 6 times an election. So if you're buying a voter, you're not buying 1 vote for election. You're buying 4, 5, 6 votes for election. So when you start looking at a lifetime of votes, might be thousands of votes. So really, when you buy a voter for $1 million of taxpayer money, maybe it's only $10,000 a vote. So it's a pretty good deal.
Well, actually, it is a good deal. But let's go back to what Judge Hanen said, because what's remarkable about this is this judge actually put a stop to DAPA. Right. By saying that I'm going to suspend the law until this has gone through its proper legal channels.
But it didn't stop.
But funny enough, even though he stopped the law,
right.
The Department of Justice attorney, something Hartnett, Miss Hartnett, told him, oh, it's all going to stop the moment you say this. But funny enough, he found out that it didn't stop. In fact, DAPA kept going and gave these people the rights not to be deported.
Well, I beg to disagree here. First of all, he didn't stop a law, okay?
He put a hold on it.
There was a Congress, there was a law going through that would have done DAPA or DACA. That went through Congress. It failed. It didn't pass. Okay, so the president said, well, look, what I'm going to do is basically break the law. I'm not going to enforce the law, and I'm going to break the law. So basically, I would say what Judge Hanen did, he stopped an illegal act by the president.
Oh, you're talking about an executive order, the phone and the pen.
Yeah, well, but see, there's a law that says the executive shall do this, and he stopped that. So basically, I would say that's a conspiracy to conduct a criminal enterprise. So what I would say Judge Hanen stopped was a conspiracy to conduct a criminal enterprise. I don't think he stopped the law.
But what's interesting about this
He stopped
is
the law from being broken.
What's interesting about
Thousands
this,
and millions of
what
times,
is very interesting about this, a decision came down the same day he made this ruling about DAPA in a case involving DACA. And in DACA, the state of Mississippi sued the government, saying that it was going to be, it's too discretionary to have a district attorney to make decisions about whether somebody should be deported or not, and there's no way the financial burden should be suffered by the state effectively. But what's interesting is the law in Crane versus Johnson came down on behalf of the administration, basically, but left open the same arguments that are made by Judge Hanen in the DAPA law to be reinterpreted by the same circuit, the Fifth Circuit.
Okay, well, let's look what the DOJ, Department of Justice, argued that they have a right to do prosecutorial discretion. In other words, they don't have time to prosecute every crime. If they've got 20 murders they got to prosecute, they don't have time for kidnappings, and they don't have time for burglaries. They don't have time for jaywalking because they have these 20 murders, and they're going to do the murders first. That's called prosecutorial discretion, and that is perfectly acceptable, and it happens all the time. But that's on a case-by-case basis. What's happening with the DACA is that you're saying, and whether it's whoever it is or whatever law does it, this is a huge constitutional case, because what it does is it has a president who's involved in a RICO, which is basically a racketeering enterprise, who's saying it's an executive order, whatever it is, but he's basically breaking the law. So it doesn't really matter whether it's got anything to do with immigration or the price of tea in China. Basically, here's a law. It's like saying, okay, let's say you're the president, and you say, well, I'm not going to prosecute murderers anymore. People can murder as much as they want.
Well, here's the thing. Here's the thing that's interesting in it. The DAPA law doesn't apply on a case-by-case basis. It applies to a whole.
That's what I'm saying. It's like saying we're not going to go after murder.
Everybody falls into this.
No, but I mean, it's like saying we're not going to prosecute murders anymore.
Anybody, like murders are freebie now.
Or anybody who does kidnapping, it's okay.
So no more deportations. Well, and that's what Judge Hanen
But the point is,
it
doesn't really matter if it's deportations or if immigrations or if it's murders or kidnappings. Here you have an executive. It's like a cop saying, well, I'm not going to prosecute kidnappings. In my town, you can kidnap all you want. It's fine. Basically, that's criminal, and that's like the good old days in Chicago.
Yeah,
and
that's exactly.
And so I don't think that the judge is restricting a law. He's stopping a criminal enterprise from proceeding forward.
Well, it's interesting. He's actually called the Department of Justice's attorney to the floor, and she has to produce a memorandum explaining who told her to tell these stories in his court, in which, by the way, she could be sanctioned. In fact, the Department of Justice could be sanctioned for misleading the court with the idea that DAPA was not in operation, when in fact DAPA has been fully already implemented.
They were giving out work permits.
They're giving away their work permits.
100,000. And they're lying to the judge.
What's another $5 million?
They're lying to the judge the whole time.
Okay. Yeah, but anyway, Mark, why don't we look? What's our next subject tonight? Because I know we're waiting for those decisions.
Yeah, we've got something.
What's our next one?
April 22nd, something's going to come up. Good.
So what's our next subject tonight?
It's coming up. Okay, so this is about distilleries. If you want to start a brewery, a distillery.
Well, there's a lot
of
my cousins have already started one of those. Now, how are those playing tonight?
So, well, the thing is, the problem when you have a distillery or whatever, it's always the revenuers, right?
The revenuers.
Dang revenuers.
Are we talking about the Dukes of Hazzard kind of thing?
Yeah. Who's the guy with the jug? It was like the cartoon character. I forget what is the guy's name?
Yeah, but it's the whole idea that out in the forest we have a still.
Yeah. So there used to be thousands of stills in the South during Prohibition, which is the best thing that ever happened to bootleggers. But the main thing about booze and liquor is taxation. So if you're going to do a distillery, the big issue is like, where did all the liquor go? Okay? Your tanks have to be labeled. Your tanks have to be numbered. You have to keep track of every drop of liquor, okay? Now, sometimes, it's hard to account for. If you spill some, you got to account for a spill.
Well, what I understand is you spill some, you have to pretend like you sold it, and you still have to pay tax on the amount that was spilled. You got to pay for it.
No, if you can document it's spilled, if you can document it's spoiled, if you document it went into the barrel, it soaks in the barrel, you can document it has been evaporated, you can document that loss, but it's got to be documented because
Well,
otherwise you're going to be taxed for it.
Well, I have a question though. After doing thousands and
How many
thousands of
spills?
gallons, how are you going to be documenting that? Oh, by the way, we lost a few hundred gallons.
Well, the thing about it is because they will look at your books. They'll look at like how much corn you bought, how much you bought, how much water you used, and you're supposed to do kind of a balance on this and explain where everything went. And if you can't, because what they say, what comes up in evaporation, that's called the angel share. What goes into the drum or the barrel, soaks in the barrel, that's the devil's share. But but I mean, if you can't explain where it went, you get taxed.
Okay, well, I'm gonna give you something that's is relevant to all borrower owners in California. It's called the Board of Equalization.
Yeah.
What they do is they monitor every bit of alcohol you purchase.
Right.
And if you
That's it,
can't
some mass
account
balance,
for so
right.
mate drinks per bottle
Right.
and you're taxing,
Right.
then they'll come in and say, oh, we speculate that you get 16 shots out of every bottle. And at $5 a shot, you owe us X. And if you're saying, I only got, what do you mean? I didn't get 16 shots. I got 12 shots. Oh, sorry, you owe us for the 4 shots, even if you didn't get the 4 shots. And it should have been at $5 a shot. So what happens is California has its own little unique group that enforces that. But tell us about Distillery.
Okay, but I'm saying it's the same kind of thing for Distillery. You have to have your tanks labeled. You're supposed to keep track of where everything goes. And so anything that you can't keep track of course, you're going to be taxed as if it was sold.
Yeah, well, that's unfortunate part about that is that if you're not paying attention, you can be under strict scrutiny.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, because it's such a huge subject, the alcohol sales, and it's such a huge taxed item.
It was the first thing that the U.S. government ever taxed.
Yeah.
The Whiskey Rebellion. It was the
Whiskey Rebellion.
First source of revenue there really ever was. And it hasn't changed at all, okay? And so then another issue, if you're an owner of a distillery, who can drink at work? So then you've got a problem, like say you have interns, are they 21? Let's say that you have the winemaker or the beer meister or whoever's doing it, they have to drink to taste it, right?
Right.
But then the other time, what if the other employees are drinking, they're drinking at the bar and they've got like your, something brewery t-shirt on, they start scaring away customers. So there's a lot of problems with employees drinking at work at the distillery because you're in a distillery, there's a lot of liquor.
Well, I got to
So
tell
that's
you,
something that's gotta be watched.
if I was in Colorado once and went to I did a tour of the Coors Brewery, and,
Right.
and I will tell you that it seems as though that beer is readily available.
They were smiling.
And they were smiling. They were happy. It was a happy group of employees.
Happy group of employees.
And when they say it's mountain fresh or it comes from the mountain, they're already past the mountain part. They're already in the brewery.
Yeah. So, okay, so there's issues there. And then also if you have employees that work for your brewery or your distillery, they get a DUI, there's other problems there. So there's certain problems.
Well, they're not holding companies liable for employees that get DUIs, are they?
Well, but it is a kind of a thing that you might get sued. There could be a problem.
Would that be the old Dram Shop Act? The idea that if you get drunk at a bar, that it would be the bar's responsibility?
Right. Well, they're supposed to cut you off when you're...
Yeah, it's supposed to cut you off when you've had too many.
At a certain point.
Yeah, but is that at what level?
Well, that's kind of a discretionary thing.
Oh, discretionary. Is that a lot like the enforcement of the DAPA and the DACA?
Yeah, sort of. It's like, well, those are in those emails on that server. But okay, so, then you've got wage, hour issues, you've got volunteers, you've got interns, you've got all these different things about are the interns or the volunteers just working for booze? Whether that's a form of payment.
Yeah, but what if they only want to work for booze?
Okay, and then you've got, do you have underage employees? That's another problem. And then you've got tip and tip pools, the front and back end of the restaurant, or not the restaurant, but the brewery and the wine tasting.
But
and all
what
that
about
kind of.
ownership?
Ownership's
a whole different
Okay,
ball game,
we're
isn't
almost there. We got safety. There's also, when you're cleaning your kegs, sometimes you use acid to clean your kegs. You can have exploding kegs, so there's safety issues. So there's a lot of liability involved having distillery.
The only time I've ever seen an exploding keg is if it rolled down the hill and somebody thought they could tap it after that happened.
Yeah, okay. And so then you've got trademark issues. What are you going to call your brand? You can have a generic name. If you call it Good Beer, everyone's going to say, well, you stole our, everyone's going to say, well, that's our name, and that's our name. If you make up a completely, imaginary name, that's the best. If you call it like Apple or, Apple's a great, it just has nothing to do with the product. It's hard for you to get copyright or trademark
problems.
problems.
I understand this is one of the biggest areas of trademark infringement.
Right.
Is the name of like the private breweries,
Well, there's
all
Bud,
the small,
Bud and Budweiser.
Right.
Okay, we've got Bud here. They got Budweiser in Austria, and they're always fighting over who's the real Bud.
Yeah.
Then you've got descriptive, right? Like if you say like cold beer or something, well, you're going to have big fights about that all the time.
Right.
Generic names get you in trouble too. So basically a made-up name like Red Tail Beer is probably your best bet, something like that, which completely has nothing to do with
Well,
beer,
okay, I will tell you, we're not on trademarks tonight, but
Okay,
will
we're
tell
gonna
you
move
one
on.
of the largest trademarks infringement right now, the largest trademark infringements are all the little private breweries that are trying to make their own beers.
Right.
And everyone calls it this beer, that beer, sort of beer, kind of beer.
Right.
And the problem is that each time they do that, what's going on is somebody else has already called it that,
Right.
and there seems to be nothing but enforcement actions against other people
Well, so
infringing on trademarks.
I'm just saying you have to be very careful in picking your name. The more imaginative, the more it has nothing to do with anything. The crazier your name is, the better, really, in a way. That
Well, I
you're,
agree with
you're
you.
not generic, you know. Okay, so trade secrets, recipes, employee confidentiality, problem all the time, winemakers, brewmeisters, whatever, switching companies, taking the recipe. A huge problem. Okay.
Well, it's just like Coca-Cola or any other.
Right.
There's a recipe that goes along with the basic
Right.
manufacturing, and if somebody else steals that,
Right.
it is a proprietary piece of information.
Right.
And the question is, are you going to create another Coca-Cola? But I'm not going to call it Coca-Cola.
Pepsi.
I'm going to call it Pepsi.
Yeah, right. Okay, so those are some of and then we had some of the issues that you were bringing up earlier about, well, if you're an owner of a bar or a distillery, anything like this, when you start getting into this, particularly when you're doing retail, when you start to retail, then you have all these tied house laws, which means that they don't want the distillers and the brewers necessarily connected up with the retail. They want them to be kind of separate.
Well, what they don't want is some kind of organized where it looks
like the
they
good
just
old
don't
days.
want
The good old days.
The good old days when we used to be able to control it from the tap to the drink.
Yeah. So we
we can't do that anymore, but we sure try.
So what they have, if you're an owner, you're a 10% owner or greater,
Right.
in any kind of bar or retail liquor, wholesale liquor, you've got to go through the ABC, and then you've got to go sign an affidavit. Your wife has to disclose, and they do a background check, make sure that you're not co-owners or have ownership interest
Well,
over 10%.
there's more than that. You can't have any criminal background.
Right.
You can't do anything that involved any type of other ownership of a liquor distributor or manufacturer. In fact, it's very regulated so that the people don't have any way to make dual income by somehow cutting the corners with a distributor.
What they don't want is, like, you know, some producer to giving a special deal to a retailer, you know, pushing other people out of the business and that kind of thing. They don't want to have special price
But I thought
structure.
pushing people out of the business
was our business.
That was our business.
It was our
We love the business.
The South Side.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, you know, that's what that whole is. They don't want to have a monopoly. They don't want you to get in specialties. They want everybody to have the same opportunity to buy and sell pretty much the same
well,
price.
I'm going to leave that on that happy note, because you know what? We'll have a cold one after tonight's show.
Yeah, then hope you don't get
and
pulled
then hopefully
over.
we won't have a trademark infringement or a pullover.
Pull over, because we get pulled.
When you say pullover, what do you mean, Mark?
Because if you get pulled, you might have a breathalyzer test.
A breathalyzer test.
And
What
so-
is a breathalyzer
Okay,
test?
when the police are after you for a DUI, there's a couple ways of getting evidence, right? And one of them is a blood test, which is a pretty reliable method, but it's kind of, you know,
It's costly.
It takes some time and
takes time.
expertise and that kind of thing. The other is a breathalyzer, right? And that's the simplest test and the most common. And the other one is a urine test, right? And so
Well, I understand the urine test is rarely used anymore.
rarely used. Well, the police tend to use the urine test and the blood test when they suspect there's some other kind of drug involved.
Yeah. Well, the urine test will show the other drugs.
Yeah, well, so will blood test. You can pick up the things in the blood
But the
test.
blood test, you have to have a phlebotomist that does it, somebody trained to draw
Right.
your blood, which is an added expense to any police department, to have somebody on call
And if
24
they're
hours
available,
a day
right.
to take the blood, and that's a big deal. So what they've been relying on mostly is the breathalyzer.
And so with the breathalyzer does have some interferences, because it doesn't strictly measure alcohol. It measures like kind of an aldehyde group, and it could be a lot of things, like, for instance, a soy sauce.
White bread.
Soy
I understand
sauce, white bread
will-
will bump you up a couple points, or 0.02. Okay, let's
Toothpaste.
well, let's talk about some of the numbers. Okay, in California, they call it a BAC. It's blood alcohol content, but it's usually measured in a percent of BAC, your blood alcohol percent. So what's illegal, or what's the line, is 0.08. So that's 0.08%, right? Now, every drink you take is about a 0.02. And your body can get rid of, depending
Well,
on
you
how
metabolize.
your liver can take care of about 0.01 per hour or so. But those numbers kind of change around depending on a bunch of
Well, it
factors.
depends on whether you're eating,
Right.
and when was the last time you really ate, what's your normal body distribution of the alcohol through the liver. I mean, there's huge variety of
Right.
physiological issues that go through with each person.
But generally, after a couple drinks, and then for sure after 4 drinks, you'll be in some trouble, and depending how quickly you drank those and what you drank. For example, if you drink a beer, right, that's going to be absorbed into your blood much slower, right? Whereas I mean, you know, it's going to start to incorporate and kind of give you a different effect. It won't get you that blast effect. So I mean, but when you drink hard alcohol, right, your stomach will actually shut down and won't take it in. So it might even be later than beer. So it depends on what you're drinking, how fast you drink, and what you're doing.
But you know, the whole issue is that we as individuals know when you feel intoxicated. So if you're feeling,
but you don't really know. I mean,
Yeah.
the thing is, it's considered an intent crime, but it's kind of a political crime in a way, because you might think you're perfectly all right and you still get busted.
well, see, that's the problem, because you could easily some people have one drink and they couldn't drive a car if they were paid $1 million to drive down the street, and just because, whoa, I'm happy-go-lucky. Other people that are consistent high tolerance drinkers
Right.
could drink a 12-pack and literally go, hey, what's the big deal? I can do the walk, I can do the alphabet, I can do everything, but if you give them a blood test,
Right.
they're going to be at 0.2. So
Right.
there's a whole issue of events. But the thing about the breathalyzer, that is why there's such a high degree of data that they're showing from various doctors about how it's not reliable. They're saying it'd be up to 15% off. And when you're talking about 0.08 in California as legally intoxicated, and they're talking about blood alcohol content, if you're off by 15%, you could easily be below that 0.08. But just because it's coming from your lungs, and that's when the police say, take a deep breath, because now they're going to draw things out of your lungs that could have literally been 2 drinks.
Right. Okay. So like I said, it depends on what you're drinking. Like I said, if you're drinking a hard alcohol, your system might shut down and not process it right away. So that might show up a little bit later. That might show up an hour and 15 minutes. You're drinking a beer and you're slamming if you're having a Boilermaker, a beer and a shot, that might go in your system really quickly and get into your blood. So there's a difference between what's going on in your stomach and what's going into your bloodstream.
Well, I have a question. As another attorney that's done DUIs, what do you recommend your clients? Should they do the breathalyzer or take a blood test?
Well, I think the breathalyzer is probably, usually the way to go. Now, but there's a bunch of caveats to that. First of all, you have a roadside test, and someone's going to say, well, take what they call a PAS, right? Preliminary Electrical Screening. That's supposed to be non-evidentiary, but then they use it for evidence.
They always use it for evidence anyway.
But if you're over 21, you don't have to take that, okay? Also, they have what they call the field sobriety tests, right? Which are very...
that's a discretionary.
They're very subjective.
Yeah.
All right, you have a right to refuse those. So people are saying, well, the police might say, look, if you don't take this field sobriety test, I'm taking you to jail. Well, that's okay. So you get taken to jail. It's one thing to get arrested, it's another to get a conviction, right? And so you don't have to take a field sobriety test. You don't have to take the roadside test if you're over 21. So that's, you can just say, look, I want to speak to my attorney. That's the end of it. You don't have to do the alphabet backwards, just stand on one foot or do anything.
Here's what happened. Under California law, and this is something because driving is a privilege, not a right.
Right.
You have a duty to submit to some test.
Oh, when you get to the station.
Yeah, when you get to the station, but you don't have to do it on the road.
No, well, the thing is they don't have the equipment there on the side of the road. Now, in some cases, they do have the equipment,
Sometimes
but
they have the equipment.
It's a big box, and they usually don't carry it, right?
Right.
It's usually back at the station. When you get back to the station, if you don't take that breathalyzer, they're gonna assume you're gonna lose your license. They're gonna assume you had a DUI. You're gonna get hit with pretty much the same
well,
thing.
here's the other part of that. When you refuse that,
You
they
gotta
can
refuse them.
easily force you to take a blood test,
Oh,
even
yeah,
though they say they can't.
No, they can. They do.
They can force you to take a blood test, and that means you refused. You lose your license for a year anyway.
Right.
And now we're going to forcibly take your blood. And then if it turns out you're intoxicated, not only that, you have the drunk driving, plus you mandatorily. And if it's your first time, you really don't want to get into a big battle about did I refuse or not.
Yeah, and the thing about the breathalyzer is pretty subjective. I mean, I've seen videotapes at the cop shop where they're like, blow harder. The guy's getting a .06, and like, if you blow real hard,
keep going. We know we can get 0.08 out of
Yeah, and the thing is, like, because different parts of your lungs kind of have different levels, right?
That's correct.
What's in your throat, what's deep in your lungs, And it gets all kind of confusing because you have all these alveoli and there's the blood transfer. But basically what's going on in your lungs is what's in your blood is 2,600 times stronger than what's in your air. So basically they're taking this air, they're multiplying it times 2,600 times to get your blood. Okay, you've got blood surrounding all these little alveoli sacs, right? And then you've got a membrane in your lung, and that crosses, that hits the air, and that's what you're measuring. So you're doing it 2,600 times. So if anything's a little off, it can be quite a bit off. Also, there's things, gastroesophageal reflux disease, GERD, if you burp, if you throw up, you're going to have stomach alcohol in your
breathing,
coming out your throat.
Right.
And
right there, you're going to have a higher content.
Well, that's going to make you about 100 times higher than you would.
Well, the GERS is a classic defense for that.
Right, but I mean, just stomach alcohol can interfere with what's in your mouth, right? And your lungs aren't consistent with what's coming in your mouth.
Well, you know, stomach alcohol is going to show that you're totally intoxicated.
No, it's about 100 times or 200 times
so
what
you're going to be bombed.
Yeah, and, well, you know, you could have like one drink and it'd make you look like you had 6 or 7.
Yeah,
you know? But the thing is, you know, it's not precise, but you're going to have quite a bit more. So, I mean, mouth alcohol compared to lung alcohol compared to stomach alcohol, completely different things. I mean, if you're measuring stomach alcohol, you have a lot of alcohol. You know, if you're measuring breath alcohol, you shouldn't have that much. Mouth alcohol could be several different things.
Well, you know, there's always the story of your client who took a shot right before he got in his car because it was the last shot for the night. He jumps in his car, and the first thing he's done is his last shot turns into the first pullover of the night. And because he just had a shot, you know, if it's tequila or some one of the alcohols that has a strong smell, well, obviously you smell like alcohol when you open the window, and you're going to come out, and that's fresh. And those are the breathalyzers you really don't want to be involved with.
Well, see, technically they're supposed to wait 15 minutes before they take.
They're supposed to monitor you for 15 minutes.
Make sure you don't drink anything or burp.
Yeah, if you don't have a drink. But the question is, when you look at the timeline and how they monitor you,
right? How
long is that really?
Well, I'm saying that also, you know, when you're taking that breath, it depends. Actually, men have slightly advantage over women. The more your stature, you tend to have a more throat and less in your lungs when you do your breathing.
Right.
Also, depending on how hard you breathe out, that's going to change your result. If you breathe out really hard, you're going to get an extra point or 2.03.
I've talked to clients that actually try to get away with the real light.
Well, then
breath.
They'll say it's a refusal.
Yeah.
Then they'll say it's a refusal.
Well, no, they say what the story is they've been breathing lightly, and they always breathe lightly, and they can't breathe much harder than that.
I know, but the cops can put that down as a refusal.
Yeah, well, that comes down to if you're saying I'm not refusing, this is my breath.
Yeah, well, that happens all the time. Believe me, you know, they're going to say that's too bad. It's a refusal.
That's too bad. That's a refusal.
Time for you got a refusal. Now
Anyway,
it's time for the blood test.
I got to tell you something, Mark. I'm going to go get a breathalyzer, and that's the end of our show for tonight.
Okay. Anyway,
but I got to tell you, thank you very much. And tonight we covered some interesting subjects, and we'll follow up on the Judge Hanen.
See what happens with Judge Hanen.
The good Judge Hanen.
Yeah, we'll see how he.
And we'll see how far that comes along.
See how he does.
I am very interested in